Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Jack Abramoff's name is forever attached to the biggest swindle of Native American tribes in modern history. He bilked tens of millions of dollars from a handful of tribes trying to leverage political influence in the rapidly evolving Indian casino landscape 25 years ago. We'll talk with people affected by the Abramoff scandal and assess what tribes may have learned the hard way in the process. That's coming up after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Jill Freitas. Lawmakers in Washington are proposing to update a key housing law for tribal nations as communities across Indian country continue to face severe housing shortages. Last week, Montana Congressman Troy Downing introduced the American Housing and Self-Determination Modernization Act. The legislation would modernize and reauthorize the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act, known as NAHASDA, which provides federal funding for tribal housing programs, but it has not been fully reauthorized in more than a decade. Downing said in a press release that, quote, "Homeownership is the foundation of the American dream that doesn't stop with Americans in our tribal communities." The new act would increase funding and give tribes more flexibility to build, repair, and manage housing, Downing says. He says that across Indian country, many Native families are living in overcrowded homes with multiple generations sharing limited space. Mark Maccaro, president of the National Congress of American Indians, says in a prepared statement that, quote, "The time to reauthorize and modernize NAHASDA is now," end quote. Other supporters of the act, quoted in a press release, say the changes are long overdue. Senators Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Brian Schatz of Hawaii are leading similar legislation in the Senate. Ski-Coo is a nonprofit that brings skiing to communities across rural Alaska. This year, organizers tried something new to make the activity stick, training a village resident to be a coach. As Eliona Naiden reports for the Alaska Desk, the idea is to encourage kids to ski throughout winter.
Justin River Lecton was a fifth-grade student in Aniak in southwest Alaska when he learned to ski. He loved it and started going out on the river with his dogs, breaking trail, and enjoying the freedom the activity brought him.
It brought me outdoors. It took me, outside to the nature, and I was just enjoying it so much.
Now, Lecton is 21 and becoming a ski coach. In February, he joined the nonprofit Ski-Coo, which taught him how to ski and has been bringing the sport to kids across Alaska. Together, he and the Ski-Coo team traveled to several interior villages, Grayling, Anvik, and Shagaluk. The February trip culminated with a week in another community in the same region, Holy Cross, where Lecton now lives. There, he ran the show. Next winter, he will be the coach for Holy Cross kids.
They're mostly inside. It'd be great to get them outside and to do something outdoors all together as a team,
Ski-Coo has been around for more than a decade, bringing cross-country ski coaches and equipment to kids in Alaska villages. Tyler Hennigan is its executive director. He says usually after the visit, the skis go back to the closet. Hennigan says what's missing is an adult who will take the kids out.
To kind of keep those communities shredding. In my mind, I have like a Jedi Padawan situation where we can kind of have that person mentor those folks out there and really kind of hope to make something a little more sustainable too that's really more community driven.
That's where Lecton comes in, to keep it going throughout the season. Sonta Hamilton Roach says that children in her region stay active by hauling wood and working outside. But she says they don't get many chances to try themselves in competitive sports. And Roach is happy all 4 villages in her area are part of this project.
We're all the same people trying to live good, healthy, quality lives in our communities. And when you really see our tribes come together, we could do cool things.
The organizers say they hope to find more residents like Lecton to keep kids skiing throughout the season. In Anchorage, I am Eliona Naiden.
And I'm Jill Freitas.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Support by the Gathering of Nations Powwow. The last dance is this April 24th and 25th at Expo, New Mexico. Gone's last horse rider and regalia parade takes place at 4 p.m. both days. Tickets at gatheringofnations.com and at the gates.
Hear that? Tribal college faculty do so much, one can't say it all here. Nothing but respect. Visit mostthoroughdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Lobbyist Jack Abramoff swindled millions of dollars from several gaming tribes in the early 2000s, and his downfall exposed a widespread corruption conspiracy. In the years following the passage of the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, many tribes were flush with newfound wealth. To secure and expand lucrative gaming operations, some tribes hired Abramoff. But he worked to enrich himself with exorbitantly inflated lobbying fees. He also worked against tribes' interest to generate demand for his services. And he sowed division among some tribes. Tribal leaders, attorneys, and a Blackfeet lobbyist would all later work to uncover Abramoff's fraud. Today on our show, we'll hear from some of those involved in exposing this scandal and learn what's in place to prevent it from happening again. Listeners can join us with comments or questions. Call 1-800-996-2848. That is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. You can also leave a comment on our website and social media pages. Joining us now from the Black Hills in South Dakota is Philip Hogan. He is the former and longest-serving chairman of the National Indian Gaming Commission and is a counsel for Hogan Adams. He's a citizen of the Oglala Sioux tribe. Philip, good morning. Welcome to Native America Calling.
Good morning. Thank you.
And joining us on Zoom from Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan is Monica Lubiars-Quigley. She is an attorney and a former lawyer for the Saginaw Chippewa tribe. Monica, hello, and welcome to the show to you as well.
Hello, good morning, or good afternoon here.
Appreciate you joining us, Monica. Philip, I want to begin with you. Of course, you were the chairman of the National Indian Gaming Commission during the peak of the Abramoff lobbying scandal. When did you first become aware of the crimes?
Well, I don't know that I can pinpoint the exact date or time, but it was early in the kind of boom years or new boom years, so to speak, for tribal gaming. Tribes were dealing with income streams that they'd never experienced before and probably weren't real adept at handling them at that point, but they quickly learned. But under the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, tribes need to provide the National Indian Gaming Commission with a copy or an audit, an independent, outside independent audit of their gaming operation. And we started seeing numbers there that seemed disproportionate with respect to lobbying fees, things of that nature. And so we started digging into that and eventually got involved with the rest of the federal law enforcement family, and eventually all of this thing unfolded, and eventually justice was done, and Abramoff and some of his associates were brought to justice, so to speak.
Let's hear an excerpt from a 2004 NPR Morning Edition story by John Idstey. This broadcast comes after lobbyist Jack Abramoff faced questioning in front of the Senate Indian Affairs Committee, and the late Northern Cheyenne citizen and U.S. Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell was a member of that committee. Campbell presses Abramoff over his racist remarks about his Native clients in email exchanges.
Abramoff and Scanlon also demonstrated contempt for their clients in emails obtained by the committee. Chairman Ben Nighthorse Campbell of Colorado, who is a Native American, confronted Abramoff immediately after swearing him in as a witness.
You and Mr. Scanlon referred to tribes as morons, stupid idiots, monkeys, effing troglodytes, which you defined as a lower form of existence, and losers. Why would you want to work for people that you have that much contempt for?
Mr. Chairman, I have no choice but to assert my various constitutional privileges.
Abramoff refused to answer any questions. Scanlon did not appear. He has eluded marshals trying to serve him a subpoena.
That was an excerpt from 2004 NPR Morning Edition story about Abramoff being questioned by the Senate Indian Affairs Committee. Philip, wow, that was 22 years ago. Take me back a little bit. How surprised were you to find out that Abramoff was using this type of language about Native American people behind their back, clients supposedly of his?
Well, of course, we found it very offensive, and the National Indian Gaming Commission was created and hopefully operated to protect tribes and promote their integrity and increase respect. And when you hear that kind of language from people that are just raking in tons of money, it really is upsetting.
Absolutely. Now, Monica, you were working for the Saginaw Chippewa tribe, and you met Jack Abramoff face to face. Tell me about that first encounter you had, and what was his connection exactly to the Saginaw Chippewa?
Well, at that point, the tribe was kind of going through internal struggles. They had a number of people who wanted to overthrow the government, and the legislative affairs director and one of the people working for him, I think, who was part of that external group. The tribal council asked me to go with them to meet with Abramoff and see if I thought he would be a good lobbyist to work with. Well, I met with him, and he's in Washington at Greenberg Trow Rig, and he had amassed a group in the room with one Democrat, for me, who I referred to as the token Democrat.
Uh-huh.
And he was just smooth as silk. Lied through his teeth.
Give me an example of a lie he told just that first time.
Well, we had been a couple of years before that. We'd been working on a national level to work on tax issues in Congress, and the tribes won, pretty handily on that. But he said he was responsible for that win. And I said, I was there. I do not remember you. Oh, well, we were behind the scenes,
Uh-huh.
And I thought, yeah, right. So in the elevator coming down, the two people I was with said, if you don't support this, hiring Abramoff, when we win, you will be fired. And I said, well, I'm sorry. I need to sleep at night. And that was the end of the conversation. Besides the two of them talking about their evening plans to go to the Capitals game in Abramoff's box, which I thought was interesting because Abramoff had assured me that nobody was receiving anything for this. And I thought, yeah, right. And
Jeez. Okay.
It was really very, he was very I just thought very, kind of low class lobbyist that I'd seen before and disliked.
Okay. Now, it was during this time that you were working for the tribe that you reached out to Blackfeet lobbyist Tom Rogers. What inspired you to do that, and what were the red flags that surfaced about Abramoff, in addition to just these lies that you heard and just some of these other odd proclivities that he demonstrated?
Well, at that meeting, he brought up Tom DeLay as kind of being in his pocket, so to speak. And good to their word, they fired me when they got in, the opposing council members. And so I was not working for the tribe. A couple of years after that, Bernie Sprague called me. I had a sole practice here in the Sioux, asking for my help. He wanted me to look at this contract that had been proposed by Abramoff. And it was...
And just to confirm, Bernie Sprague, former chairman of the Saginaw tribe of Michigan, correct? Saginaw Chippewa tribe.
I think he was sub-chief.
Okay.
I don't think he was chair. I said, well, send me the contract, a copy of the contract, and I'll look at it. It was for acquiring Michigan registered voters' names, and it was for several $1 million. And it wasn't a very, well-written contract. And I called him and I said, this is ridiculous. This is a sham. So I called Tom Rogers and I asked him if he could find the address of this group that was proposing this contract. And he sent me a picture. It was a mailboxes, etc. Was the address that they were using for this group.
Oh, geez. Okay. All right, Monica, we're going to take a short break. We'll come back, and we actually have another audio clip with regard to, again, former Saginaw Chippewa tribe of Michigan sub-chief Bernie Sprague, and just some of these issues. Stay with us.
Kickapoo chef Crystal Wapipa's debut cookbook includes both delicious indigenous dishes and an account of her journey from caterer to food warrior. We'll talk about a feather and a cookbook on the show, and we'll learn about a small fish that is an important cultural food in Alaska and the Pacific Northwest, but it's now a threatened species in many areas. That's all on the menu on the next Native America Calling.
Support from Davis Keelan Law Firm, a New Mexico firm standing with Native families suffering catastrophic loss. When tragedy strikes Indian country, Davis Keelan fights to restore stability, dignity, and justice, bringing a voice to Native families and communities for 20 years. More information, daviskeelan.com.
Thank you for listening to Native America Calling. We're looking back at a massive fraud scandal masterminded by disgraced lobbyist Jack Abramoff. The fraud involved some tribes losing millions of dollars and a wave of attempted policy changes to prevent this from happening again. You can join this conversation. Do you remember when this whole scandal erupted more than 20 years ago? Maybe your own tribe or a tribe you're familiar with was impacted. What are your thoughts on the Abramoff Indian gaming scandal? Join us with comments and questions by calling 1-800-996-2848. 2848. Once again, 1-800-99-NATIVE. Let's hear now from Blackfeet tribal member and lobbyist Tom Rogers. Rogers is credited as the whistleblower who initially exposed Abramoff's crimes. He said former Saginaw Chippewa Tribe of Michigan sub-chief Bernie Sprague reached out to him after Sprague suspected Abramoff was defrauding the tribe. Rogers spoke with producer Sol Traverso about the immediate effects of the Abramoff scandal.
What people need to remember, if they reach back into 2006, when this whole effort to expose Jack involved the largest rewrite of ethics laws since Watergate. It reached into the House Republican leadership. It reached into the White House. It reached into congressional committee chairman. It reached into one of the largest law firms, top 5 law firms in our country. It reached into a religious leader, Ralph Reed. But all these players, Tom DeLay, you remember him. It led to the banning of earmarks. It involved almost $100 million that was stolen from the tribes. So for all those reasons, it was historical. And it helped flip the Senate and the House from Republican to Democratic control in 2006. It played a major role. So it was historical on a number of levels. Who was involved, power, ethics laws. It was huge. But the sad part is what we've forgotten, because in our world now, we have forgotten the lessons of Jack Abramoff. Earmarks are back. They're back. Money at all costs is the mantra. Power at all costs is the mantra. Our memory in this country is a nanosecond. Now, I've told you before, I don't think you should use history to imprison you, but you should use it to inform you. So there's only 3 things that are going to save America: attorneys, whistleblowers, and the media. So essentially, Saul, I hate to be this cynical, but there aren't any guardrails anymore, other than your own individual moral compass. And that's the sad part about it. There were attempts by certain politicians, certain members of the media, to frame this issue as their Native Americans had too much money. Their casino revenues were enabling this type of corruption to occur, which was a bald-faced lie. That was nothing more than a deflection, a diversion. The people who were at fault here, the 29 people who either pled guilty or went to jail, Jack and his team stole from the different tribes, where they bait and switched, incredibly immoral. Only later did I find out that it was criminal. And you asked me one time, when did I know? I knew when Bernie Sprague told me to go up to 611 Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast and see the office, as he said, the office where we are sending all of our money, our millions and millions of dollars. So I drove up there the next day after we talked until 3 a.m. in the morning. I laid down, got up about 5-6 hours later, and drove up to 611 Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast. And as I told Bernie, there's nothing up there but a gas station, a nail salon, and a bar. But there was a mailboxes, etc. It's now a UPS store. And Suite 350, Suite 375 was 8 inches wide and about 10 inches deep. That was his office. And I came out and I called Bernie and I said, Bernie, we got him for wire fraud and mail fraud. That's when I knew. Because he was not only stealing from his clients, he was stealing from his own law firms.
Can you talk a little bit about how Abramoff sowed division within tribes?
Oh, he lied to the tribes, of course. And then he would play the Coushatas of Louisiana off the Alabama Coushatas of Texas. He would do the same to the Isleta del Sur Pueblo. He would tell them that he was working to make sure they had gambling and an economic development future. And then he would tell them, but if you don't hire me and pay me this amount, the wrath of the White House will come down on you. So he would do these fraudulent statements that never occurred. And then he would use that to sow division within the tribes. And he would tell them that, other tribes were going to be getting an expansion of gambling, which would cause them to lose revenue. And, of course, less money for their elders, less money for their children. He would instill fear in them, the bottom line, and he would do that by lying to them. And sadly, they believed it, because only recently had they come to have some resources to take care of their elders, to take care of their children, to take care of their kids going to college. And he was framing it in fear so that they would lose that. It was very sad.
You came across Abramoff only a few times in person on K Street. Can you tell me a little bit about him as a person?
Jack was very, very arrogant. He lied like he breathed. a very condescending attitude toward his clients. Remember, he called his clients in emails troglodytes, subhuman. That's what he called his clients who paid him. And Jack, whatever issue he worked on when it involved Native Americans, it was all about the money. He had no concerns about their sovereignty. He had no concerns about like I said, MMIW, healthcare for the tribes, economic development for the tribes. All he wanted is, I want their money, all of it. And he said something exactly like that in his email. That work I did for them on Jack Abramoff, exposing him, none of those tribes paid me, nor should they ever pay me. Getting the hearings together, getting the FBI focused on it, that was all free. That was all pro bono, as it should be, because money was never the issue. It cannot be the issue for me. It's about your legacy. And most importantly, it's about empathy and compassion.
Why do you think it's important that you keep talking about the Abramoff case? I mean, you've done several interviews over the years. What message do you want people to take away from this?
Just like this past fall with CNN and Jake Tapper, or the documentary, or other interviews I've done. Once again, I keep coming back. You shouldn't use history to imprison you, but you should use it to inform you. And once again, we have forgot history's lesson. We're headed for another scandal, another big one. Now, people were aware. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to be completely cynical. After Jack, for the first decade, people were aware. Now, if you asked over half the staffers on Capitol Hill who Jack Abramoff is, they wouldn't even know. Because people in this country don't read. They have no sense of history, no sense of awareness. Nothing is reaffirmed. Nothing is celebrated. Only is, how much power can I accumulate and how much money can I make?
That was Blackfeet tribal member and lobbyist Tom Rogers about the Jack Abramoff case. And back to Monica Lubiars-Quigley, attorney and former lawyer for the Saginaw Chippewa tribe. Well, Monica, we heard Tom also mention the mailboxes, etc., small little office that Jack Abramoff was running there. Again, just astounding to reflect back 22 years ago this all happened. And also, of course, Sub-Chief Bernie Sprague, and who came across, the suspicion that there was fraud occurring. What's your thought?
Tom is absolutely right. If we don't keep the lessons of history alive, especially for Native Americans, I truly believe that something else will happen. And I really want tribes to remember people like Bernie Sprague, who, mid-Michigan guy, grew up with not much. I suspect passed with not much. He passed away a few years ago. We have to keep their memories alive to teach coming generations, this generation, about what happened and how we don't end up there again. Truly believe that.
Thank you, Monica. I want to bring Philip Hogan back into the conversation. He is the former and longest-serving chairman of the National Indian Gaming Commission. And Philip, we heard Tom Rogers say another scandal is coming at some point in the future. And he blames the fact that Americans don't have very long attention spans. And quickly we forget and move on to the next issue, the next high-profile event. And it really begs the question, how has tribal gaming changed after this scandal? And is there still the potential for something like this to impact Indian country again?
Well, I'm sure it could happen and likely will, hopefully on a pretty limited basis. But what tribes have gotten better at is doing some due diligence with respect to where they spend their dollars. What Jack Abramoff was very good at was creating a solution for which there really wasn't a problem. And he helped sow the seeds of doubt about whether there really was a problem. And we've got to be more careful. We've got to know the right people, and there are good, honest tribal lobbyists on Capitol Hill, some of which have been in the business for decades, and you have a good rapport with folks like that, and keep a tight handle on your pocketbook. The amount of money that Abramoff was charging was just incredible, and where those dollars went, I'm not sure we still know the answer to. But you got to be savvy, and Tom's right. Good lawyers are sometimes tribes' best friend.
Uh-huh. Now, Philip, you recommended policy changes to the Senate Indian Affairs Committee. What were some of the changes you advocated for?
Well, I'd have to look at my testimony, I expect, to pinpoint them exactly. But the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act specifies what tribal gaming revenues can and cannot be used for. And the internal controls needed to be and were established to try and ensure that happened. And of course, we had Senator Reed from Nevada, who knew the gaming industry very well, and he was active on the Senate Indian Affairs Committee. And he said, you got to play like the big boys. We've been in the casino business in Las Vegas for decades and learned how to do it. You've something to learn from us. And we did. The tribal gaming industry got more savvy after some of those dark episodes.
Now, were there any criticisms from tribes after those new regulations were put forth?
Well, there's always a dynamic tension between the federal regulator and the regulated community, as there should be. And tribal sovereignty needed to be maintained and respected. But there were things that could be learned by some standardization and looking at best practices. And so we eventually got there. We had kind of a traveling road show to go out and vet or hear what tribes thought of some of these proposals, and it was beneficial for all sides.
Philip, we heard Tom Rogers talk about how tribes in some ways were almost being blamed for this event simply because of their financial success in gaming. And I remember, I was living in New Mexico at the time, and there was a lot of talk of the Abramoff scandal, and I just remember people were saying, well, this is what we were worried was going to happen. This is what we were worried about, is that tribes would get these big casinos and they would gain power and influence, and then they would be targeted by bad actors such as this. But talk a little bit more about just the boom in tribal gaming revenue at the height of this scandal. We're talking again the early 2000s, and how specifically tribes were preyed upon. I mean, how did Abramoff go out and choose these specific tribes? And again, I'm just interested in learning more about the pitches he used and what he offered these tribes ultimately.
Well, the tribes were very good at developing this exemption, so to speak, that they had from state gaming regulation or prohibition, and dollars that tribes had never seen before were flowing into their doors. And it's no surprise that it took a little while to gain the savvy to manage that properly. So all of a sudden, business was great, dollars were coming in, and tribes didn't know exactly how best to deal with that. They gained quickly insight and management techniques, how to meet unmet tribal needs with those revenues, put the dollars in the right places. And Indian gaming was the best thing that ever happened to economic development in Indian country. That's the good news. Of course, the bad news is not divided up right, so to speak. That is, there are places where there is no market and there aren't those dollars. But those tribes that have had phenomenal success have not been bashful about sharing some of that wealth, some of that leadership and insight with tribes with less desirable marketplaces for Indian gaming.
Phil, you worked with Senator John McCain, who led the Senate on Indian Affairs Committee investigation that ultimately, made this whole fraud unravel. What do you remember about Senator McCain and his commitment to this issue?
Well, he was as serious as a heart attack about preventing this kind of thing in Indian country. He was just livid at what he was observing had taken place. And the Indian gaming community, the tribal community, is very fortunate to have had a friend like John McCain in the position he was serving at that time, as well as, of course, Ben Nighthorse Campbell, who was the committee chair for a time.
All right, we're going to take another break. We'll come back. We're going to continue this conversation. We've got a lot more to discuss, a lot more to learn about this issue. And again, this scandal really unfolded. It really hit the headlines big back in 2004. So that was 22 years ago. And I know some folks listening to the show right now, you remember this. You remember when this came down because it was big news across Indian country and even outside of Indian country. I mean, this was a national headline story, and it lasted for a long time. So give us a call. We'd like to hear from some listeners who might remember this specific period of contemporary Native American history, or maybe, again, like I posed earlier, maybe your tribe was involved or somehow connected to some of what happened, and you've got some insights that you can share, some perspectives that would really, really gain a lot of value and really add to the level of this conversation. We'd really like to hear from you. So again, that number to join today's conversation is 1-800-996-2848. It's 1-800-996-2848. Participate on Native America Calling Today. Join the conversation, participate in the dialogue, make your voice heard. Again, 1-800-99-NATIVE.
Support from Rodale, publisher of A Feather and a Fork, 125 intertribal dishes from an indigenous food warrior by Crystal Wapipa with Amy Page Condon, and a foreword by Tommy Orange is now available for purchase wherever books are sold. Support by the Gathering of Nations Powwow. The last dance is this April 24th and 25th at Expo, New Mexico. Gone's last horse rider and regalia parade takes place at 4 p.m. both days. Tickets at gatheringofnations.com and at the gates.
You're listening to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Let's now continue our conversation about the Jack Abramoff Indian lobbying scandal. Also, you can continue the dialogue on our website and social media pages, Facebook, Instagram. You can also listen back to this show and all other previous shows on all major podcast platforms. The number to join us, 1-800-996-2848. Monica Lubiars-Quigley, attorney and former lawyer for the Saginaw Chippewa tribe, one of our guests today who joins us on Zoom. And Monica, you mentioned earlier about being fired after, the Abramoff scandal started, or not the scandal, but you were ultimately fired with regard to your position with regard to Abramoff and what was happening. And you also talked earlier about how the Saginaw Chippewa tribe was really split by Abramoff's fraud. Tell me more about that time and just how it created so much division within the tribe.
It did. Abramoff worked with the opposition, and what he did was dangle the lure of Washington at the time, the K Street lobbyists, the entrance into Congress, and he kind of dazzled the opposition group, and what Tom said is absolutely right. It was about money and power. That was the lure for a lot of these people. And some of them truly believed he was working to help the tribe. It was stunning to me, stunning, even after all of the emails came out, and it was a terrible time for the tribe and the tribal nation. And Tom, I've got to say, I called several people that I thought were friends of, the Indian country, the tribes, and they refused to help. Tom is the only one who said yes. I'll
Really?
help. Yeah, and
Wow.
for that, I will forever be grateful.
Monica, Jack Abramoff, he would later publicly apologize in the courtroom in 2006 for his crimes. He gave a specific apology to Isleta del Sur, Pueblo. Also did a 60 Minutes interview in which he claimed to be very contrite. Do you feel like those apologies were sincere?
No, I don't. He had been working various scams and for years and years. I think that Abramoff at its core is evil, and really he just wanted money however he could get it. And at the time, I think he picked tribes that were doing it very, very well with casino gaming funds, but didn't have a lot of outside influence from corporations or Nevada type corporations. And he specifically targeted those tribes, I'm convinced. And I don't believe he is truly sorry at all.
Philip, how about you? What do you make of the Abramoff apologies?
Well, I don't know that I have any real insight as to how he was feeling at the time he made those remarks, but if you look at his track record, it may be a little hard to give a lot of credibility to those. But I guess I'm glad he said he at least said he was sorry, and certainly he had plenty to be sorry for.
Philip, you had mentioned earlier that tribes gained more sophistication with regard to their gaming operations over the years. What can you do to set the stage for the industry at that time when this occurred? Again, a much younger industry. A lot of tribes were not yet familiar with the types of revenues that they were bringing in. And what has been done since by tribes to protect themselves so an event like this hopefully won't happen again?
Well, in those early days when gaming was new, tribes didn't know how to do it, and there weren't very many people that did know how to do it. But a place that they did know was Las Vegas. And so a lot of the advisors and managers and so forth that were brought on board were folks from Las Vegas. And they did know how to run a gaming operation. What they didn't know was how tribal sovereignty, tribal councils, tribal government worked. And so that was kind of a rough interface. But, and there were good ones and some that weren't quite so good. But eventually, just a growing pains in such a situation that is not hard to understand. Tribes were quick to try and get their own members involved in management, sometimes at the tutelage of these experienced gaming managers from Nevada. And there's been quite a transition over the years. And the National Indian Gaming Association done a great job in schooling folks into the tricks of the trade, so to speak. National Indian Gaming Commission did a lot of outreach and a lot of training with respect to some of the fundamentals of the gaming operation. And of course, we didn't know all the answers either, but we had some good people with some Nevada type commercial gaming experience that we took advantage of. And through that transition, we've got to the place we are today, where if you look at the ranks of tribal management or tribal gaming management, most of it is tribal, and they do an extremely good job.
Philip, Abramoff was ordered to pay $25 million in restitution to tribes. What have you heard from any of those tribes that were defrauded? And do you know the status of any of those restitution payments?
I don't. While the NIGC was, had oversight responsibility, we didn't tell tribes how to deal with their dollars in all cases. So I'm not sure if all of that that money got paid back or not. I guess I'd be pleasantly surprised to hear that it had, but I don't know the specific status.
Another really shocking takeaway from this whole tragedy is the fact that it really exposed a lot of the flaws and just some of the problems with regard to the lobbying system and the way that Congress works in regard to lobbyists. And, there was a lot of situations where Abramoff would work through staffers, and he would dangle the carrot of offering them jobs after they were on Capitol Hill, lucrative jobs in the future. Those systemic issues that were able to provide fertile ground for Abramoff to commit these frauds. Are those challenges still in place, or is there any effort at all to improve those systemic issues so, again, this won't happen again in the future?
Well, the mother's milk of lobbying, I think, are campaign contributions. And there are stronger, stricter regulations in place now than there were at that time. Did they make a dramatic difference? I don't know that it changed from black to white, but I think the situation is more carefully monitored these days, and both the lobbyists and the congressmen are more, careful about how those funds are handled and how that works. But it takes money to get elected, and once you're elected, you're grateful to the people that helped get you elected, and that's the nature of the beast.
Right. Monica, the Saginaw Chippewa tribe defrauded millions of dollars with regard to Abramoff. How did they handle that? How did they recover?
They, after they got rid of Abramoff, and, some of the old council members came back, and I know I talked to Ruth Moses. She was on the council after Abramoff. They had gotten a very nice amount of money, a grant for tribal college, and they gave it to a tribe in South Dakota, gave that grant money to a tribe in South Dakota because they felt they had gotten it wrongfully through Abramoff. And I thought that story stuck with me. So they came back. Bernie Sprague, some of the council members, they turned things around. They were very careful about the money that they spent, in specific amounts of money to Congress people after that. And now I was just going through the reservation a couple weeks ago, and they have a very nice tribal college building, and they're doing very, very well. I'm hopeful that they have learned the lesson, and they've made dramatic changes. I know during Bernie Sprague's time they did.
That's good to hear. Thanks, Monica. Philip, I want to go back to you because, again, what's so astounding with regard to this scandal is, on one hand, Abramoff presented himself as someone who was working on behalf of tribal gaming interests, and at the other side of the table, he was making decisions and making plays that would work against gaming. And at one point, he funded an anti-gaming crusade to actually shut down competing tribal casinos. And I'm interested in knowing, because we talked earlier about the backlash against tribal gaming at the time, are there still ripple effects of that anti-gaming? And again, going back to Ralph Reed, the Christian lobbyist and political consultant who was also heavily opposed to gaming.
Well, there's, I think, always going to be a faction out there that is opposed to gaming. They see it as against their religious principles, that it's sinful, and they'll quote your Bible verses to support their point of view. And that's not only against Indian or tribal gaming, but they're against gaming of any kind. And I don't think that will ever go away, and I'm not sure it should go away. There are things to be said for that point of view. But I think that if you gaming comes to the country in cycles and waves, and when we saw the development of state lotteries all across the country and the legal, there was a time when Las Vegas was the only game in town, but that has changed dramatically over the years, and Indian gaming grabbed onto that opportunity quickly and readily. And some of the states have said, what's wrong with this picture? We need to get into the act too, and they have. And so there's much more gaming than there was before Indian gaming came along. So I think you will continue to deal with folks that are against gaming, but the trend has totally changed from the Ralph Reed days, I think.
We're beginning to wind down the show. We still have a couple of minutes left. But, Philip, again, here we are 22 years later. What do you think the lessons are with regard to this time in contemporary Native American history? And what do we need to keep in mind moving forward collectively as Native people, whether we're gaming tribes or not?
Well, tribes that are making relatively tons of money, before Indian gaming they weren't, need to be very careful with where those dollars go. And we need to sell the point of view that, it's integrity. And if we keep those principles in mind, we can, stay in the right place. And I think there's reason to have confidence in where we are and where we're going.
Thank you, Philip. Monica, I'm going to give you the last word. How big was this scandal in your mind in retrospect, and what lessons do we need to draw going forward?
Well, I think, as Tom said, it was the worst scandal that we've had in Congress and in, tribal nations for many years. And I hope that what we take from it is that power and money in Washington will not get you what you need on the reservations and for tribal people. It's only gaming is only a tool, and yes, it raises a lot of money. But as Phil said, you have to be careful and always remember to watch where those dollars go, because this is huge. But I'm sure there's smaller scandals that are happening now. We just have to be mindful.
And with that, we're out of time. But I do want to thank our guests who joined us today, Philip Hogan, Monica Lubiars Quigley, and Tom Rogers. Join us again tomorrow when senior producer Andy Murphy is in the hosting chair for the monthly feature, The Menu, about Indigenous food sovereignty. I'm Sean Spruce. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk again soon.
Tribal colleges and universities support their students in countless ways. They say I believe and offer help before it's asked.
Hear that? That's everything tribal college faculty do for their students on Fast Forward. Because if one tried to say it in real time, they'd be here all day. They teach, guide, comfort, and connect. And for that, the community is grateful. Learn more at mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
They give extensions, cheer progress, share laughter, create calm, and allow reflection. They inspire hope, share wisdom, guide gently, validate healing.
Attention tribal community leaders. The 2026 Tribal Self-Governance Conference takes place this April 7th to the 9th at the Gila River Wild Horse Pass Resort and Casino in Chandler, Arizona. Tribal delegation meetings using AI, Indian Health 101, land stewardship, tribal values-based communications training, understanding the tribal-federal relationship, and more, all at one convening. The full draft agenda and registration are available at tribalselfgov.org, who support this show.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.